What's up, guys, and welcome back to Job Site Conditions right here on Deco-Crete TV. My name's Jeff, and on today's episode, we're going to be showing you guys how to create a one-of-a-kind kitchen countertop out of glass fiber reinforced concrete. Now, this is going to be a step-by-step video with all the tools and equipment that you'll need, so stay tuned and you're going to learn all about it. Now, today's project rates as a 5 on our DIY meter, and the product we're going to be using is this G.F.R.C mix from Deco-Crete. Now, G.F.R.C has been used for a long time in the commercial building industry, but in the last 15 years or so, man, it's become really popular for decorative concrete. Now, its high strength and lightweight make it the perfect material for casting concrete countertops. The ability to cast vertically gives the installer a lot of freedom to create things like integral sinks or waterfall edges, as well as fabricate all kinds of custom furniture pieces. Now, we started playing around with G.F.R.C over 12 years ago after we had to carry an 800-pound island top down into somebody's basement. Now, just for comparison, if we had used G.F.R.C for that piece, it would have weighed less than 350 pounds. So we solved all those weight issues, but the only problem was that now we had all these different components that we had to go source, and everything had to be weighed out individually. Well, this Duracast system just completely changes all that. The face and back are mixed or pre-packed in 40-pound bags, the modifiers pre-diluted and ready to use. Now, there's no more weighing anything out. All we got to do is add liquid to powder. And there is a pretty wide range of the amount of liquid that you can add, so you still have the freedom to create a tight or flowable mix. Now, the first thing we need to do for any kitchen countertop project is to build a template and mold. And if you've never done this before, please check out these two videos right here. So G.F.R.C does need to be cast upside down, and it's just not going to work for any of those pour-in-place projects. Casting is generally done in 3 different layers, 1 face coat and 2 backer coats. And the cool thing is that G.F.R.C really only needs to be a 3/4 inch thick, but you can form them edges up as tall as you want. Now, this makes it possible to create a piece of concrete that looks like it's 2, 3, 4, even 5 inches thick, but it's still only 3/4 in the middle, but it would weigh less than half of what it would with normal concrete. Now, G.F.R.C can also be cast in 3/4 inch panels, which is great for walls or fireplace surrounds. Now, the tools and equipment for a project like this are going to be a little bit different from person to person, but the important things that we're going to need for the job are a heavy-duty mixer, an air compressor, a drywall hopper gun, and some chip brushes for the face coat, a bubble buster roller, some drywall knives, and a few concrete trowels for the backer, and we're also going to need a grinder just to finish up the edges the next day. For today's project, we're not going to be putting any color in the mix, but if we were, it's just really easy to dose with these mini yard packs. Now, we'll be using rock top mat for the sealer and finish it all up with some beeswax, and don't worry, all these tools and equipment are all linked right down in the description. So with all that out of the way, it's time to head to the job site and get started. So we just got out here on the job site, and today's location is Weave Design's shop, and big thanks to Weave Design for letting us hang out in their shop today and shoot this video. So I wanted to point a couple things out because they've got this form all built and ready to go, and everything is looking awesome here. And one of the first things is, if you guys notice that they got this whole edge taped off, and this is a really good idea because this just keeps everything nice and clean and just keeps all our G.F.R.C from building up on the edges so we don't have as much cleanup later. The other thing that they've done is, if you look at this, there's actually no fasteners going down through the side rails. They do all this with foam blocks and hot glue. And the other thing that we're going to be doing today is we're going to be spraying a little bit of this 2300 release on there, and that's just going to give us just a little bit of a bond break for when we pop this thing out tomorrow. So the great thing about this system is all we need for mixing is what I've got right here. We have our bag of face coat, we got our bag of backer coat, and then we have our modifier, and that's it. We don't need any extra water reducers. The only thing we might need different is if we were putting some color in it. We do that right now. So to get started, one of the first things we want to do is we just want to go ahead and pull the lid off this bucket of modifier and just give that a spin. As far as the face coat goes, we're going to start with about 3.5 quarts of water. and then we're just gonna, mix that up and try to work our way into that sweet spot as far as slump goes. We're probably gonna end up being closer to 4 by the time it's said and done, but the biggest mistake we can make here is just putting too much liquid in right away, because there's just not gonna be any way to dry that back up. So we're just gonna measure out our liquids, we're gonna drop them in our bucket, and we're gonna put in our face mix all that up very, very thoroughly. Today we're gonna be using a handheld mixer, but even a handheld, it's important that we have one that's just strong enough for the job. Important thing is that we let this fall set for, about 5 to 7 minutes. So once we got it where we want it, just, take your mixer out, let it sit, go put the release on the forms, and, do some other things you need to do while that's fall setting. And then after that 5 or 7 minutes, we'll mix that back up. And then we're gonna have a nice even slump throughout the life of this material. We can give it a little bit more liquid at that point if we want. And then again, at this point, you just have to find that part that you're looking for. This is gonna be a spray application today, so we want this stuff pretty loose. It's honestly one of the biggest mistakes that you could make is just having this face mix too tight. Now, if you're doing a hand pressed design, or you're spraying vertically, like a real high pack, then we might wanna leave it a little bit tighter. So you kinda have to swing that pendulum wherever you want. We got a nice range though, anywhere from 3.5 to 4 quarts of water. We got plenty of room there. When it comes to the backer coat, it's gonna be the exact same thing, a little bit different, mix ratio. What we're gonna do is we're gonna start with more like 3 3/4 quarts of modifier. For that backer coat, we just need a little bit more there. But again, we have to know where we're at in the process. It's one of the biggest things when it comes to G.F.R.C. is we're not gonna always be able to make this the exact same consistency. Depending on what we're doing, we might want this a little bit tighter, a little bit looser. Again, there's plenty of range there to work with. You should be able to find the exact spot you want. As far as mixing this, it's the exact same thing as the face coat. The only difference is we have the fiber in there, but just go ahead and mix it all up. So this is the hopper gun we're gonna be using today, and this one happens to be from Bond Tools. Although, this is just a standard drywall hopper gun. This is something you can pretty much get at any hardware store. If you guys aren't sure, I recommend starting around 30 to 40 PSI and then finding that spot you want. When we're spraying this stuff, a couple things that's gonna be important is that, we're gonna get it in the gun. I always like to test it on a little bit of cardboard first, just to make sure everything's spraying good, find that PSI you like. The other thing to keep in mind is when we're spraying these edges, we're gonna get a lot of sand that's gonna wanna kind of come back out of the mix. And you're gonna notice that it's gonna wanna build up, especially along the side rails, along the corners. It's always important to kind of look ahead and look at that sand build up, and always just be constantly blowing it back onto where you've already sprayed. So I can just be spraying, let go of my trigger, and it'll just blow air, and I can blow all that stuff out. If I don't, and I let sand build up along this corner, or this edge and this corner, what's gonna happen is I'm gonna cast over that. It's all gonna seem great today, but tomorrow when I pop that out, it's just gonna be a dead spot there because it never actually got any face coat on it. So a couple things to think about here when it comes to the brushing stage. And first of all, this is just a cheap chip brush. The whole point of brushing this stuff is if we just left it just like this out of the gun, there's just a lot of little air pockets under there that we can't see right now, that if we just left it like that, tomorrow when we flip this over, we're just gonna have a lot of little bug holes in it. And so the reason we're brushing it out is just to fill all that stuff in, smooth it all out. A big area of focus on brushing is right in this little transition right here. Again, when you spray that, if it didn't quite hit that edge, that's an area that we're just gonna have to patch tomorrow, and we try to avoid that if we can. And when we're shooting this face coat on, we're looking for about that 1/8 of an inch of face coat, but honestly the biggest mistake there would be going too thin and not having enough material to actually brush out and get a good coverage on it. So it's always good to have a little cup of water with you here just so we can keep this brush somewhat clean. The biggest thing is whenever you do that, just make sure you kind of shake most of the water off. We don't want to get a ton of water in there on our face coat. So I always try to keep a little bit of a shallow angle, something like that, as opposed to a real steep angle like that. It just helps me to not push through it. Along the sides here, again, we really want to focus on really getting that transition and coming up the sides. There's always going to be a couple little bug holes here and there that we might need to fill in, but the idea is to make as few of them as possible. A good practice is, as soon as we're done with the face coat and we have our gun cleaned up, we're just going to go right to mixing that backer coat up, because generally by the time we get that mixed up, let it fall set, get it to the slump we want, it's usually a pretty good timing for going ahead and putting our backer coat on. I always like to just, very lightly touch it with a gloved hand, and what I'm looking for is I still want to be able to make a depression in it. I don't want it to be completely hard, but I don't really want it pulling up on my glove. And so if I can push into it a little bit, but I'm not marring it up. I know I'm just right on timing. So this stuff's been sitting here for, a few minutes now, and you can see that it's definitely tightened up from when we mixed it up. And that's why we let it go through that fall set period. Now, honestly, depending on what stage you're at, this isn't a bad slump. Again, this is one of the biggest things that you gotta adjust to what you're doing. And if I have a real high pack and I need this stiff stuff, it's a nice thing just to do that on the edges, and then I don't need it on the horizontal. I can loosen it up a little bit, and when we get to the final stage, I can really loosen it up and almost let it self-consolidate. And so that's the reason that we have this range, is to give you guys the freedom to make whatever slump you want. So a really important tool and a really important step in this process is one of these Bubble Buster compaction rollers. And you can see these things have all these little teeth on them. And running this little guy over it, it's just gonna compact everything together. It's going to work the air to the top, and this is what's going to make all those layers, or help all those layers, become one. And so this is a really important tool to have, and make sure you're using it right. Make sure you hit everything. And again, it's just so important, even on these edges, to always be pushing it back against the other coat. I always like to kind of run my hand along it, again, just in an effort to just mesh everything together. So on this first backer coat, we do have to be a little bit careful that we don't push anything through the face coat and end up with a blemish on a finished surface. So I just like to make these little pancakes. That way we can just place them really nice and gently down right on top of that face coat. And again, we're shooting for about 1/4 inch on this layer. Now, when we get to the second backer coat and after the scrim's in, well, then we don't have to worry about any of this anymore. We're not gonna damage anything, and we can loosen this material up. We don't need to worry about making them pancakes anymore, and we can just kind of push it around and fill up the mold. Now, it is possible to spray this backer coat, and we can do that with one of these mortar sprayers from Deco-Crete, and these things honestly work awesome, especially if you're short-handed. So after we get the first backer coat down, that's when we're gonna put our AR scrim between the two layers. And for those of you guys that pour concrete, this is almost like putting wire in that concrete slab that you poured. And it's just something that's just gonna be an extra layer of reinforcement. It's just gonna help everything hold together real nice. And so the process is, after that first backer coat is in, we're gonna have this stuff cut, ready to fit. And we're just gonna lay it in there, just kind of push it in with our hands. We can use that bubble buster to kind of embed it a little bit. We don't wanna push it way down. If you embed it way too far, there's always a chance maybe you see it through the face. So we're just gonna get it to where it's embedded, just to where it holds in place. And then after that, we're gonna go right back over it with our next backer coat. I honestly like to use a drywall knife. Works good just to dump it in, spread it around with the drywall knife, maybe a trowel. Some people just use your hands. Any kind of real high pack areas, sometimes I might put it on those kind of edges. For something this size, there's really no reason to roll it up this edge here. By the time we build that edge out to 2 inches thick, it's gonna be fine without the scrim. So you guys can see how we're building out these edges here, and this is pretty important because, this G.F.R.C is only about 3/4 inch thick in the middle there, and that's perfect. That's where we get all the lightweight, properties of this. It's just there's not much concrete there, but when it comes to the edges, we're gonna need a little bit more. This is for a kitchen counter that's got 1.5 inch overhang on it. And so that means that we have to have a minimum of 2 inches on these edges in order to catch that cabinet. And if you're gonna make a bigger overhang, then it's just gonna have to be more than that. I've always just thought it's pretty easy just to go ahead and build them up by hand, kind of like building the curb. As strong as this G.F.R.C is, at 3/4 inch, it does still have a little bit of flex to it. And these edges really add to the rigidity of that, and it just stiffens everything up just really, really nice. So don't forget about the edges. So you guys can see, as we're putting this backer coat in here, it's sticking up past our form, and that's okay. Honestly, trying to make this edge perfectly flat and flush to that form, with all these fibers and just the nature of this product, it just is not gonna work out for it. There's no way to make that perfect. We had to make a little bit more at the end, so we're just gonna finish filling this in, finish building out these edges, and we are done for the day. The only thing we're gonna do, after we have the backs just troweled off a little bit, again, I like to just run a steel trowel over that. We're never gonna see that. It just adds to the presentation of everything. And then we're just gonna cover it up with plastic for the night. It's good to put plastic over this at this point. G.F.R.C really likes to generate heat, in that first 24-hour period, and so plastic is a great idea. Some people might even put heater blankets over it to speed things up. Those are all good stuff. What I would never do is just let this go and just not put anything over it, because it's just gonna slow down that cure. So we get here in the morning, we're just gonna pull the plastic off, we're gonna start grinding down the edges, and we're gonna flip everything over, so we'll see you guys tomorrow morning. So now that we're back here the next day, we can see that everything is nice and hard, and it's really amazing how much strength this stuff gains in only 24 hours. And you can see a little bit of moisture that's still kind of hanging on the surface here, and again, When we got here this morning, underneath that plastic, it was always some moisture, and that's a good thing. We wanted to retain that. So now all we got to do is we just got to, grind these things down nice and flush. And, and a good variable speed angle grinder is a nice thing to have for this. That way you can turn this thing down and it's not spinning quite as fast. We can hook up a vacuum attachment to this, and that way we can collect all our dust. And I also really love this flat hybrid wheel here. It just doesn't want to grab and throw chunks as much as a cup wheel or an aero wheel might do that. And the idea here is, we set these forms up to the exact height, and we always want to leave those forms on while we're grinding, because that gives us something nice to ride along. If we were going to pull the forms first, it'd just be really hard to make this nice and flat. Now, as soon as we grind all these ground down, we're just going to go ahead and start pulling our side forms off. Again, these are all just put on with hot glue, so we don't need any drill or anything. We're just going to pull those off with a putty knife or by hand. And then after that, once everything is good to go, everything's clean so we don't scratch anything, we're going to go ahead and release the seal and flip these guys over. So one of the biggest challenges here, especially on a bigger piece like this, it does create a lot of suction when you cast this stuff, and it kind of creates like a seal on your mold, and sometimes it can be a little bit of a challenge to break that loose. So for a really cool technique and a really easy way to pop this out, check out our Technique of the Week video and we'll go through the whole thing. Well, that's pretty much it here for day 2. We got these things all ground down, flipped over. A couple things to point out is you can see how we have them up on these styrofoam blocks. And this is pretty important because, as these things cure, we want that air to be able to get completely surrounding the countertop. And so just setting it flat on a table or flat on the ground is just not a good idea. It's just going to slow down the cure. And we're just going to let this cure for, a minimum of 1 week, but even better, 2 weeks is better yet, just to let that thing completely cure out. Anything you're going to do next as far as stain or sealing, the more cured out we can be, the better. We got one little blemish in this top over there, and that's okay. That stuff can always get patched up. Again, these are concrete countertops. They are not going to be perfect. Please check out our job site conditions video on our matte countertop sealer for a full tutorial on how to seal these things. And after that, we are on to installation, and this job will be wrapped up. Well guys, our concrete countertop project is now complete, and that's pretty much it for this week's show. Now, thanks again to Andrew from Weave Designs for letting us hang out at the shop this week, and thanks to all of you guys for watching these videos. Man, we really appreciate all the support that you guys show to the channel. If you guys found today's video helpful, please let us know by hitting those like and subscribe buttons, and if you're already subscribed, don't forget about that bell icon so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos, and it really helps our channel out. For more information on live, in-depth training on decorative concrete, please go to deco-cretesupply.com and click on the training tab. So from all of us here at Deco-Crete TV, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.